I gave up my life to care for my sick father for 3 years. That's not just a sentence, it was my entire world for a long time. I didn't do it for praise or recognition. I did it because he was my dad and I loved him. When he got sick, it felt like everything stopped. My normal days, my routine, my plans, they all just disappeared. One doctor's appointment turned into many, and before I knew it, I was rearranging my entire life around his care. At first, I thought it would be temporary. Maybe just a few weeks of helping out until he got better. But weeks turned into months and then years. I left my job because I couldn't keep up with both. I had friends I stopped calling back. I missed weddings, birthdays, even funerals, because Dad needed me. And I told myself, it's okay. He'd do it for me if the roles were reversed. I believed that. I held on to that thought every time I was exhausted or felt like crying alone in the kitchen after putting him to bed. There were good moments too. Quiet talks in the afternoon, little smiles when I brought him his favorite tea. He'd sometimes hold my hand and say, "I don't know what I'd do without you." Those words kept me going. I felt close to him. Closer than I'd ever been. I thought we had this unspoken understanding, like I was his rock and he was mine. I never once imagined that everything I was doing would end with the kind of heartbreak I wasn't ready for. Every morning started the same way. I'd wake up before sunrise, even though I hadn't slept much the night before. The first thing I'd do was check on him, make sure he was breathing okay, not in pain, still dry. Then I'd start his morning meds, fix a light breakfast, and help him get cleaned up. Some days he was grumpy, frustrated, or silent. Other days he was confused, calling me by my mother's name, or forgetting who I even was for a moment. It broke my heart, but I smiled anyway. I kept going. After breakfast, there were doctor's calls to make, prescriptions to pick up, groceries to grab. I couldn't just leave him home alone, so I'd rush through everything, praying I'd be back before he noticed I was gone. When home nurses came, it gave me a little break, but even that wasn't really rest. I'd use that time to do laundry, scrub the bathroom, or pay bills. There was always something. Lunch, more meds, physical therapy exercises. Then I'd sit by his side while he napped, afraid something might happen if I wasn't near. By dinner, I was already drained, but the day wasn't over. He needed help getting changed, sometimes help using the bathroom, then one more round of meds before bed. After I'd tuck him in, I'd finally sit down. And most nights I'd cry a little. Not because I regretted anything, but because I was so tired and I felt so alone. Loneliness became a quiet companion. The phone barely rang. My social life disappeared without me even noticing. People stopped inviting me places after so many "I can't make it" replies. Friends meant well, but life moved on for them. For me, it stood still. I missed conversations that weren't about medications or insurance. I missed laughing. I missed feeling like a person instead of just a caregiver. Sometimes I'd feel flashes of resentment, not toward my dad exactly, but toward the situation. I was losing myself. My body ached from lifting him, my mind was foggy from lack of sleep, and my heart felt like it was on autopilot. I loved him, but I didn't recognize the woman in the mirror anymore. I looked older, tired, distant. And then there was my brother. He'd pop in now and then, usually with an excuse. "Work's been crazy. The kids have soccer. I'll try next week." I heard every version of "I'm too busy" in the book. He lived just 2 hours away, but sometimes it felt like he was on another planet. When he did visit, it was short and awkward. He'd act like a guest, never asking how I was, never offering to help. Just in and out. I stopped expecting anything from him. Still, in the middle of all that heaviness, there were little moments that reminded me why I stayed. Like when he'd look at me and say, "You take such good care of me." Or the way his eyes lit up when I made his favorite soup. Or the time he asked me to sit with him and watch an old black and white movie, something we hadn't done since I was a kid. He held my hand that night and said, "I'm glad you're here." I clung to those words. They were like patches on a worn-out quilt, tiny pieces holding everything together. Because no matter how hard it got, I believed I was doing the right thing. I believed I was honoring him. I believed he saw that. And in those rare, tender moments, I felt like maybe I wasn't alone after all. I stood in the corner of the lawyer's office, staring at the floor like it might give me answers. The air felt too still, too heavy, like even the walls were waiting to hear what came next. My father's will was about to be read, and while grief still clung to my shoulders, I held on to the belief that I knew where I stood in his heart. But life has a cruel way of rewriting your story when you least expect it. The lawyer's voice was calm, clinical, detached. Exactly the opposite of how I felt inside. To my son Richard, he began, and I waited for the next part. I waited for my name, my moment. I leave the house, the savings account, and the lake property. All personal belongings and assets are to be transferred to him as sole beneficiary. I blinked. Truly there was more. Pause. A page flip. A missing addendum. But there wasn't. That was it. No mention of my name. Not a watch, not a photo album, not even a thank you. After all the years I spent caring for him, running errands, checking in on him, while Richard breezed in twice a year with a bottle of wine and a charming smile, I got nothing. Not even acknowledgement. At first I thought it was a mistake. I looked around the room, at Richard who sat smug and silent, and at the lawyer who seemed almost bored. My voice came out small. Is that everything? The lawyer nodded. It's all clearly stated. I felt the heat rise up my neck. My hands were trembling, but I clenched them in my lap. I looked at Richard. He wouldn't even meet my eyes. My mother said nothing. My aunt shifted uncomfortably. No one rushed to my defense. No one said this can't be right. Just silence. And that silence said everything. I managed to make it to my car before the tears came. My whole life I'd believed in loyalty. I believed that showing up mattered more than words. That being the responsible one counted for something. That love, in the end, would be returned in kind. I was wrong. The next day I came back to the house. Not the one I grew up in, but the little apartment I'd been renting for years while helping him stay in his. I packed in silence. I didn't answer Richard's calls. I didn't respond to the message from my cousin saying, "I'm sure your dad had his reasons." Yeah, I bet he did. I packed everything I owned into my car and drove. Not to a new life exactly, just away from the old one. Away from the betrayal, the humiliation, the wound that would take longer to heal than I wanted to admit. Grief is heavy, but betrayal is what knocks the wind out of you. It changes how you see the past, and how you step into the future. I don't know why he did what he did. Maybe I never will. But I do know this. I walked away that day not just from the house or the family name, but from the idea that I had to keep earning love from people who'd already made up their minds. And in some strange, bittersweet way, that might have been the inheritance I needed most. A month had passed. 30 days of silence, like a thick fog that refused to lift. No calls. No messages. Not from Richard. Not from my mother. Not from anyone who sat so calmly in that lawyer's office while my name was erased from my father's legacy. I was starting to breathe again. Not well, not deeply, but enough to get through the day. And then the phone rang. I almost didn't answer. It was a number I didn't recognize. Local but unfamiliar. Something told me to pick it up. So I did. "Hello," I said, cautious. There was a pause. Then his voice. "Hey, it's me," he said, weak and low. It took me a moment to register who it was. My father. The same man who had cut me out of his will like I was a passing stranger. Now calling me. From a nursing home, he explained, though he didn't need to. I could hear it in his voice. The frailty. The uncertainty. He didn't sound like the man I used to argue with about politics or cable bills. He sounded like someone who had lost his grip on everything, including maybe his pride. I need help," he said quietly. "They're talking about surgery. I don't know what's happening. I don't have anyone here." I froze. My heart stuttered, and for a moment I forgot how to breathe. There was a part of me, the old part, that wanted to jump in the car. The part that had always shown up. The part that packed his groceries and sorted his pills and remembered his appointments even when he forgot to say thank you. But that part had been gutted the day I sat in that lawyer's office and listened to my father pretend I didn't exist. I clenched the phone tighter. "Call your heir," I said, my voice colder than I expected. "Call Richard." Silence. A heavy, shattering silence. Then I hung up. The phone slid out of my hand onto the table. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there staring at nothing as the weight of everything settled in. Bitterness. Guilt. Betrayal. Strife. All of it tangled together in one impossible knot. Part of me hated myself for saying it. Another part? It felt like the first time I'd ever stood up for the years I lost being the good one. He made a choice. And so did I. And no matter how much it hurt, I wasn't going back. Comes in flashes now. One minute I'm pouring coffee, the next I'm back in that tiny hospital room, holding a paper cup of water to his cracked lips, whispering, "Just sip." Slowly. The machines beeped, the nurses bustled, and outside life went on. But mine had paused, again. I don't remember exactly when my life started revolving around my father's needs. It wasn't all at once. It was little by little. Missed dinners, postponed trips, phone calls that always started with, "Can you just..." The vacation I never took to Italy? I'd saved for a year. But then his blood pressure spiked and I cancelled. My suitcase stayed half-packed by the door for 3 days as if I might still go. The job I lost? That one hurt. I'd been showing up late, always with a valid excuse. Hospital visits. Pharmacy runs. Doctor's notes. Eventually they stopped caring about my reasons. They needed someone who could be fully present. And I was running on fumes. Relationships faded like photographs left in the sun. Friends stopped inviting me places because I always said no. The man I was seeing, Mark, gave me an ultimatum one night. I need to be a priority too. I looked at the phone in my hand where my father's number had just popped up again, and without thinking I answered. Mark walked out while I was still on the call. Holidays were the hardest. I remember one Thanksgiving sitting alone at his house while he dozed in the recliner, a tray of food untouched beside him. Richard had posted a picture that day, skiing in Aspen with his kids, their cheeks red from laughter and cold. I was eating lukewarm stuffing on a paper plate, the only sound in the room the slow hum of the oxygen machine. Sometimes I wondered if my father even noticed what I gave up. The answer came the day his will was read. All of it, every property, every penny, every sentimental thing went to Richard. The son who came around with charm and convenience. The son who never spent a night in the ER waiting room or argued with nurses about medication schedules. I, on the other hand, knew every dosage, every doctor, every allergic reaction. I had a scar on my wrist from when I caught him mid-fall in the bathroom and slammed into the counter. I had dark circles under my eyes for 5 years straight. I'd given up dreams I didn't even know I had. And for what? A quiet, clean line in a will that omitted me like a typo. Still, even now there are moments, quiet, unguarded moments, when I remember the way he looked at me after a procedure, confused and tired, and whispered, "You're still here." Yes, I was always there. And somehow that's both the comfort and the heartbreak. Because I showed up for someone who, in the end, didn't see me. Not the way I had hoped. And now I'm left picking up the pieces, not just of what was lost, but of the person I was before I gave it all away. I've asked myself the question more times than I can count. Why him? Why did my father choose my brother, absent, detached, and mostly indifferent, to inherit everything? Why was I, the one who showed up, cut out completely? No explanation. No letter. Not even a sentimental token. Sometimes I lie awake at night, turning it over in my mind like a stone that never smooths out. Maybe it was cultural. In some families, the eldest son is the chosen one by default. The name bearer. The legacy. Maybe in my father's mind that was reason enough. It didn't matter who was present, who sacrificed, who held his hand through illness. It mattered who fit the mold. Or maybe it was manipulation. Richard always knew how to say the right thing. He could turn a 5-minute phone call into a full-blown love fest, complete with "You're the best, Dad, and we should get together soon." He was charming, smooth. He had a way of making people feel important, even if he didn't mean a word of it. I wouldn't put it past him to plant seeds over time. To whisper, "You know, I'll never be able to afford that house by the lake." Or, "You've already got someone taking care of you, she'll be fine." And maybe my father believed him. Or wanted to. Maybe he thought I didn't need anything. That I'd be okay because I was always okay. I showed up. I adjusted. I took the hit and kept going. So maybe in some twisted logic he figured I didn't need his help. But Richard did. So he gave him everything. I try not to get bitter. Some days I succeed. Others, not so much. Because the truth is I'll never know the real reason. He took that with him. And I have to live with that silence. The kind that lingers long after the funeral flowers have faded and the sympathy cards stop coming. I'm learning slowly that peace doesn't always come from answers. Sometimes it comes from letting go of the questions. Or at least learning to live beside them. Maybe my father did what he thought was right. Or maybe he made a terrible mistake. Either way, the outcome doesn't change. What does change, what I can change, is how I carry it. I can let it harden me. Or I can let it shape me into someone stronger, more self-defined, not dependent on someone else's validation to feel seen. I don't know why he chose my brother. But I know what I chose. To live, to move forward, and to stop waiting for an apology that will never come. And maybe, just maybe, that's the truest form of peace I'll ever get. Looking back, I see it all more clearly now. Not just the pain, but the patterns. The little ways I abandoned myself while trying to hold everything together for someone else. And as much as it hurt, I wouldn't trade the lessons I've learned through this journey. Because some truths only show themselves in the breaking. The first was about boundaries. I used to think love meant saying yes always. Showing up no matter what it cost. I thought sacrifice was proof of loyalty. But over time I learned that love without boundaries becomes self-erasure. You can pour from your cup until it's empty, but if no one notices, or worse, expects it, it becomes less about love and more about survival. Self-worth doesn't come from how much you give. It comes from knowing you are enough, even when no one claps for your effort. I spent years trying to earn appreciation that never came, believing that if I just did more, tried harder, stayed longer, he'd see me. He didn't. And when he didn't name me in the will, I thought that meant I failed. But I didn't fail. I gave more than most would. I showed up when others didn't. And if anything, that speaks to my character, not my worth in someone else's eyes. I also had to confront expectations, the ones I had of others and the ones I had of myself. I expected fairness, recognition, gratitude. I expected that love would be reciprocated in some way. And when it wasn't, it shattered me. But in that emptiness I found clarity. To anyone out there in a caregiver role, especially if you're the quiet one doing the work behind the scenes, hear this. Don't lose yourself while saving someone else. Your life matters too. Your dreams, your relationships, your health, they're not disposable just because someone else is in need. Care deeply, but care for yourself too. And forgiveness. That's the final piece. Not for them. Not to excuse what they did or didn't do. But for me. Because carrying resentment is like drinking poison and hoping someone else feels the pain. I had to let it go. Not all at once. Some days I still pick it back up without realizing. But more often now I remind myself, you did your best. You were there. You mattered even if they never said so. I'm learning to live from that place. Not bitterness, not regret, but peace. It's not the ending I wanted. But it's the one I've chosen. I live in a smaller town now. Quiet streets. Friendly neighbors who wave when they pass. I found a job I enjoy, steady, simple, and mine. No more frantic phone calls. No more waiting for approval that never came. Emotionally, I'm not all the way there yet. Some wounds take longer to heal than others. Grief still visits from time to time, softly without warning. And betrayal, well, it leaves a shadow. But I've stopped letting it define me. I'm rebuilding. Not just a life, but a sense of self. I've started going to a book club. I took a weekend trip by myself. Something I never let myself do before. I laugh more. I sleep better. I'm learning how to be present without guilt. There are days when the past still tugs at me. Days I wonder what if, but those are fewer now. What's more present is the peace that comes from no longer begging to be seen. I've reclaimed my voice, my space, my worth. I used to think walking away meant giving up. Now I see it differently. Sometimes walking away is the only way to protect what's left of you. And what's left of me? It's enough. More than enough. It's the beginning of a new chapter. One I'm writing on my own terms.